Krish, you're here in North America while we're filming this, but you're not a North American. You are a Brit, and as such, I'm just wondering, because we're talking about North America, Lausanne, North America, what's your impression of what's going on, state of the gospel, work of the church in North America, and then the world?
Wow,
Just
I love the scale of your
in 2
question.
minutes, if you can answer all those things.
So there's lots to be encouraged about.
Yeah.
I love things like people like Tim Keller. The work he's doing is having a ripple effect across the world, particularly the UK. There's a thoughtful pastor who does apologetics. That's really unusual. And so his kind of status and ministry is really kind of shaping things. But again, within kind of other streams, so the more charismatic stream are having a huge influence in the UK. Groups like Bethel, not just through their kind of singing and worship, but their vision to kind of bless the city that they're in. I heard they were giving $1 million to support the local fire brigade and police station, and that's a really interesting model of mission that is resonating around the place. But to be honest, I think there are some real challenges. The word evangelical, because of the way that evangelicals are perceived in America as being pro-Trump, against immigration, that makes it harder to be an evangelical in the UK. Less people are comfortable with that because the primary understanding of evangelical is shaped by that.
The US makes sense. Yeah, it seems around the world though, it's kind of an American and maybe some spillover, Canada, UK, Australia. Around the world, evangelical is a remarkably positive word. In fact, in some ways it's rather ethnocentric or American-centric, that the word's kind of taken on a negative connotation here, but around the world. So talk to us about what God's doing around the world from what you see. You're former head of the Evangelical Alliance. I mean, you're in the UK. You're all over the place. You're kind of a big deal. I have to tell people, because Americans don't know anybody who's a big deal outside of. We're glad you mentioned Tim Keller, but I mentioned you, and people like he's kind of a big deal. So tell me, what are you seeing around the world?
So I am very privileged. I get to see a lot of really exciting things around the world. My personal passion is around the most vulnerable people, particularly vulnerable children, and I'm seeing the church really step up on that. So I was in Ukraine recently. Ukraine has a huge number of children in orphanages. They haven't changed much from the Soviet era orphanages, and I met families who had adopted in Ukrainian families, adopted 10 children out of one orphanage. And the ripple effect that kind of mercy and grace has to the wider population, it's impacting government, it's impacting decision makers. So there's some wonderful little stories like that. I've met a similar movement in Singapore, in Russia. This vision that we might, again, demonstrate hospitality as a dominant missional mode. I'm finding that quite an exciting picture.
Let's explore a little more. Hospitality is a dominant missional mode. What does that mean?
So for a lot of people, mission is something that you do in a periodic or episodic way. So lots of churches have programs.
I just love the fact you use the word episodic. It's so British, and you look fabulous while doing it. So in a periodic and episodic way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like once a month, I'll volunteer at the food pantry, or I'll do giving food out to the homeless. And I go, that is amazing. You can look back to the Lausanne movement and the kind of tying together of social justice and evangelism as two blades of the same scissors, as John Stott used to say, and go, great. But I think there's another level of how justice might work out, and I think hospitality might give us the mode to understand that. So, for these families in Ukraine, when are they doing justice ministry? Is it once a month?
Yeah.
Is it 2 hours a week? No, they 24/7.
It's every morning at breakfast. It's every for sure. Wow.
And for me, that matches Jesus' ministry. How many hours a month was Jesus doing justice? It wasn't a activity for Jesus to do justice. It was an ontology. He was doing justice all the time. And so I love this emerging kind of movement of people, like the move-in movement that we were hearing about earlier at this conference. People deciding to move into the neighborhood. So you're
moving with the urban poor, engaged in that community.
Sending your kids to the local school. When are you doing justice? Well, it's all the time. And I think this idea of hospitality, opening our lives up, welcoming the vulnerable, the poor, not just into a program, not just into a building, but into our homes and lives, I see that as a really exciting development.
And I wonder, we look at culture shifting a lot in the West in the last 10 years. How has that impacted the receptivity of the gospel and our modes of mission? Talk to me about both.
So in my country, the UK, I think we're slightly ahead of the curve of what's happening in the US. So in terms of secularization,
I think so,
and so we've found that there is, I suppose, a distrust about Christians. being in public life. There's a whole group called the National Secular Society that say religion ought to be excluded from public life. It has no place there. So we've got that movement, but at the other level, you've got actually the most vulnerable people are getting more vulnerable, and the state really doesn't have any capacity to help, and haven't got any money to help. But then they see the church as a possible resource, and we're invited in not because we're a Christian, but because we're willing to help.
Right, because that altruistic is what's connecting.
Yeah. And for us, that's been amazing. So I've been doing a lot of training, particularly with social workers. So we're trying to help a local authority to find more foster carers. And we say, okay, if you're going to work with Christians, we need to help you orientate to make sense of that. If you were working with the Bangladeshi community, you do some cultural orientation. So we're going to do some faith literacy training.
Nice, wow.
And I get maybe 100 social workers in the room, and I'm doing pre-apologetics. I'm helping them to understand how equalities work with Christians. What does it mean to be a Christian? That's part of someone's identity, not just a choice. So we're using a lot of the same identity politics, but we're kind of doing a bit of a judo move on them to show actually you need to apply this also to the area of faith. And that's giving us an open door to transform the church's relationship with government and the social needs.
Wow. All right, so you're this multifaceted individual, this Renaissance man. You pastor, an academic, London School of Theology. You've done all these, you've done everything. At some point,
Jack of all trades.
You've been in charge of everything in the UK, perhaps the world. What encourages you today about the church? And then I'm going to ask you what discourages you, but tell me what encourages you.
So I'm encouraged when the church genuinely steps out and starts to get engaged with the most needy. And I was just chatting with Danielle Strickland recently, and she put it like this. When she needs to find her faith again, when she needs passion again in her relationship with God, she doesn't go to prayer or Bible study, she goes to help the poor. And it's in helping the poor that she comes to a fresh realisation of God. And I thought, actually, I've seen that. I've seen Christians do that. That it's not, I'm not going to wait until I'm feeling spiritual enough or I'm educated enough. It's actually, I'm going to get out, get involved, and in that involvement, I'm going to draw on the resources of God. I'm going to worship Him and praise Him in fresh new ways. And I'm seeing younger people, particularly millennials, really kind of stepping into that space. So I find great encouragement in that. Just the ordinary people doing extraordinary things for the gospel, that makes my faith come alive.
Yeah, we had you speak at the Amplify conference this year. I think international, you're not the only international guest. North America had Canada and the U.S., but you're the only person outside of North America. Help us a little bit to think about this issue of sharing the gospel, because one of the concerns we have is that that gospel would be in our hearts, in our actions, that our lifestyle would align, but also that we would share the gospel with words. So talk to us a little bit about that. What's helpful for people to embrace evangelism as a lifestyle, including sharing the gospel?
Yeah. So there was a big movement in the UK where people were misquoting St. Francis of Assisi. Preach the gospel, use words if necessary. I can't ever find a reference for that.
He never said it.
Doesn't match his practice, but we keep quoting it. But I say, okay, if anyone could have preached the gospel without using words, you'd have thought the Son of God incarnate would manage it. He lived a perfect life. He lived a life of grace and generosity, and yet he was a preacher. But equally, if anyone could have preached the gospel without using actions, well, Jesus could have done that.
Sure.
But he didn't. He tied the both together. And for me, this is really important. And it's, again, one of the precious things for me about the Lausanne movement, that they've tried over the generations to tie these things together. Because I say to people, okay, well, what are you going to prioritise? Bible study or prayer? You've got limited resources, you can only do one. And people go, don't be crazy. Your Bible study feeds your prayer, and your prayer feeds your Bible study. It's both and. Or I say to people, what about your body? It's got limited resources, you're tired, it's going to shut down one of its services, your lungs or your heart. Which one are you going to go for?
Tough choice.
But actually, your lungs don't work without your heart, and your heart doesn't work without your lungs. They are symbiotically related. And I think we need to tie those two together. And what I see it in the kind of extremes of the church is people that try to do gospel ministry only through words, or people that try to do gospel ministry only through actions. And at the moment, probably just the way our culture is, you will get applauded when it's gospel ministry only through actions. Right. And I want to say, look, part of being genuinely Christian is to hold those two things together.
And that was the awkward pause I promised you.
You did.